Hey everyone, welcome back to Playing Quietly. My name is Ryan, and today I'm bringing you another Remnant 2 video. With the Awakened King right on the horizon, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about my top picks for accessories that you should be getting to prepare for the Ritualist. So let's take a look at amulets first. So you guys know it, you love it, it's my favorite item in the game, the Toxic Release Valve. So swapping firearms is going to release a toxic cloud, which deals acid damage to all enemies within a 7-meter range and applies corrosion. Next up, we have the Chains of Amplification. This increases all damage dealt to targets suffering from a status effect by 20%. So our next two items are maybe some very situational things that we might find useful, but I'm still kind of up in the air on it. And that is going to come in the form of the Detonation Trigger and the Effluvian Enhancer. Now, I say these are very situational because they're only going to buff one particular status effect, but they could end up being good. We're just not that sure yet how things are going to pan out, but they might be things to look at. Again, the Detonation Trigger and the Effluvian Enhancer. Detonation Trigger is going to make it so explosions deal 25% extra damage, and they're going to apply 1,255.5 burning damage over 10 seconds. And the Effluvian Enhancer is going to give us a flat 20% acid damage increase and corrosive damage of 50%. One thing that I am sure is going to be quite useful is the Energized Neck Coil. This is going to increase status effect damage by 25%. Applying a damaging status effect creates a 5-meter explosion for 20% of the status effect's full damage. This one I think is going to be really huge, so definitely pick it up before the patch hits. Next up, we have the Escalation Protocol. I think this one could be pretty good with something like Miasma. This one is going to increase all damage dealt by 2.5% for 10 seconds after killing an enemy, which stacks 10 times, and dealing damage refreshes the timer. So, in theory, we are going to have dots going at all times, so damage is always going to be ticking. So, again, that's just a guess at how this is going to work. We are going to need to get our hands on the actual expansion to see if that's going to work as I theorize. But again, I think this is going to be an interesting one to look out for. Next up on our list is going to be the Lemire Sensor. This is going to increase mod duration by 50%, but increase mod cost by 15%. So this is another one where I'm not entirely sure how it's going to interact and how it's going to play with the Ritualist, or if mod power is even going to be that viable, but I have a feeling that this one might be a good one to pick up, so keep an eye out for it. Something that I think is going to be very, very useful is the Night Weaver's Grudge. We're going to gain 25% crit chance and haste when within 15 meters of an entity suffering from status effect. I think this one is going to be really, really, really good to get. The next one is going to be a bit of a pain to get. You're going to have to make the choice on whether you think it's worth it or not, but I think the One True King Sigil might be pretty good. This one's going to increase mod damage by 20%, enhancing the effect of Fey Rin Sigil and Fey Lin Sigil by 50% per sigil equipped. So you are going to have to give up Fey Rin and Fey Lin sigils to get the necklace, and get both the sigils back if you want to complete the set. Next up, we have another very situational one, the Shock Device. This is going to increase shock damage by 20% and overload by 50%. And again, it could be very situational. I think there's probably some better options out there, but if you were interested in going with a pure shock build, this would definitely be one to get. Same thing is going to hold true for our next one, the Talisman of the Sun. This is going to be the fire version of the elemental amulets, where we're going to increase fire damage by 20% and burning damage by 50%. Again, could be good, but very situational, I think. All right, so that is going to do it for the amulets. Let's take a look at some of the rings that we are going to want to get. So first up, we have the Stone of Malevolence. Elemental damage is going to generate 15% additional mod power. Again, I have a hunch that mod power is going to be really powerful with the Ritualist, so I think this is definitely one we're going to want to look out for, especially since it is elemental damage and mod generation centric. The next item on our list, I am not really 100% sure on. I'm just working on a hunch here, but I think the Embrace of Shahala is going to maybe be something interesting to take a look at. The wearer gains 5% incoming damage reduction for each negative status effect or blight they are suffering from, max 4 stacks. I'm not sure if this is going to come in handy, but it might, so it might be something to take a look or keep a lookout for. Next up, I think, is going to be something in every single Ritualist build is the Alumni Ring. This is just going to give us a flat 10% increase in all elemental damage across the board. Timekeeper's Jewel is next up on our list. This is going to increase the duration of all status effects applied by the wearer. Duration varies per status. Next up, we're going to combine 3 rings into one slot here. We have the Acid Stone, the Fire Stone, and the Grounding Stone. Each of these are going to increase their respective element by 10% and provide us 15 to each of their resistances. I'm not sure that these are going to be worth stacking, but you never know, so definitely pick them up just in case. Something interesting might be the Alchemy Stone. This is going to increase lifesteal by 6% when suffering from a negative status effect or blight. Again, just working on a hunch that we might be able to apply status effects to ourselves, so might be something worth taking a look at. Next up, we have Burden of the Gambler. Since I think a lot of our damage is going to be coming from our dots and not necessarily from our weapons, I don't think weak point damage is going to be all that useful to us. Instead, gaining an extra 10% crit chance and 20% crit damage I think might be pretty good, so this is going to be one to keep an eye out for. Now we come to Devouring Loop. I think this one might have some really good potential. Critical hits have a 1% chance to reset skill cooldowns, can only occur once every 10 seconds, increases all incoming damage by 10%. Since we're going to be really heavy on the skill use, I think this one might be pretty good, especially if we are going with a crit-centric build. Next we have Excess Coil. Activating a skill grants a shield for 25% of max health, cannot stack with itself, lasts 15 seconds. I think since we are going to be using skills quite a bit, this could be a nice damage buffer if we need it. Then we have the Kinetic Cycle Stone. This one is going to increase mod and skill cast speed by 20%. Again, those are 2 things I think we're going to be using quite a bit of, so it could come in handy. Next, we have the Probability Cord. This is just going to give us a 30% increase crit damage by... Next up, we have the Probability Cord. This is going to increase our crit damage by 30%. And again, I have a feeling that crit is going to be pretty good for our dots builds. Next up, we have the Reaping Stone. This one could be good, but again, I think we're going to have to wait and do some testing, but after an elemental status effect is removed from the wearer, they become immune to all elemental status effects and gain 3% base damage dealt as lifesteal for 10 seconds. Next up, we have the Sapphire Dreamstone. Critical hits reduce skill cooldown by 3%, can only happen once every 2 seconds. Then we have the Shard Banded Ring. This is going to increase mod damage by 12%. Something that could be quite situational but may end up being very good is the Singed Ring. This is going to increase all damage dealt to burning enemies by 10%. Then we have the Spirit Stone. This is going to increase mod power generation by 10%. Next up we have what I think is going to be a pretty big one, the Stone of Continuance. This is going to increase skill duration by 25%. So again, for things like miasma, I think that is going to play really, really well with something like that. Next, we have the Tempest Conduit. After receiving elemental damage, we are going to increase all damage dealt by 10% and resistance to the received element by 20 for 20 seconds. Again, I'm not sure if this is going to be any good, but it is something to keep an eye out for, just in case. All right, that is going to do it for the rings. Let's take a look at some weapons that we might be interested in. Of course, the Enigma is something we are going to want to pick up as it is going to deal shock damage for us. The Hellfire is going to give us our burning damage. And of course, one of my favorites, the Nebula, is going to give us corroded damage. And the three weapons that we are going to want to look out for in melee are the Gas Giant for our corroded damage, the Krell Axe for our shock damage, and Smolder for our fire damage. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Those are just the items in no real particular order that I think are going to be really good for the Ritualist as an archetype. If there's any items that I left off the list that you think would be really good for the Ritualist, let me know in the comments down below. But we will see you guys next time. Have yourselves a good one.